So, Maximilian, nice to meet you after all this time. In a nutshell, please can you tell me and tell the viewers your claim to fame?
I was a French lawyer and politician who became one of the most influential figures of the French Revolution. I was the architect of the Reign of Terror in France, and am most often referred to as the person associated with the French Revolution. My philosophy and actions during the time known as the Reign of Terror apparently represented how badly off track a revolution can go, replacing the tyranny of the king with the tyranny of the Committee of Public Safety.
Thank you. So tell us where it all started. Where were you born? And tell us a bit about your family.
I was born Maximillien Marie Isidore de Robespierre in Arras on 6th May 1758. My father was a lawyer and my mother was the daughter of a brewer. I was the eldest of 4 children. Sadly, I lost my mother when I was just 6 years old. My father was unable to cope with the loss of my mother and abandoned us children, who were brought up by our aunts.
Thank you, Robespierre. So since we are all children and we're all at school, it would be very interesting to find out about your schooling and education. Can you tell us a bit about it?
At the age of 8, I went to the College of Arras. The bishop then recommended me for a scholarship in Paris, where I trained to be a lawyer and graduated at the age of 23. Upon my graduation, I received a special prize for 12 years of exceptional academic success and personal good conduct.
Well done, congratulations. Can you tell us a bit about your influences as a student and what nickname you earned?
As a student, I became greatly influenced by the philosopher Jean-Jacques Rousseau and adopted many of his principles. I was fascinated by the idea of a virtuous man who stands alone with only his conscience. I gained a reputation for defending the poorest of society and earned the nickname the Incorruptible for sticking to strict moral values.
Thank you. So, tell us how you entered public life instead of following your career as a lawyer.
I soon took on a public role, calling for political change in the French monarchy. When I was 30, I was elected to the French legislature. I became increasingly popular with the people for my attacks on the dreadful French monarchy and my support for democratic reforms. I started out fighting for basic human rights for all, rich, poor, slave, free or otherwise. I opposed the death penalty and slavery. Some of my foolish colleagues saw my refusal to compromise and my rigid stand against all authority as extreme and impractical. After a time, I left the legislature to push my agenda outside of government. In 1789, I was elected president of the powerful Jacobin political group. A year later, I participated in writing the Declaration of Rights of Man and Citizen and foundation of the French Constitution.
Right, so let's get to the very interesting bit. Tell us about the King, Louis XVI. What was going on with him?
As France was plunged into the revolution, the King, Louis XVI, was unable to maintain control of the country. All kinds of violent things happened, including one event where 2,000 people were dragged from prisons and killed by mobs in order to force justice. When the people of Paris rose up against King Louis XVI in August 1792, I was elected to head the Paris delegation to the new National Convention, faced with pressures both from outside and from within. The revolutionary government instituted the Reign of Terror in September. In the next 11 months, 300,000 suspected enemies of the revolution were arrested and more than 17,000 were executed, most by guillotine. An unknown number of others died in prison or without trial. In the frenzy of bloodshed, I was able to eliminate many of my political opponents. Tens of thousands of people died in the terror, and I had to be particularly brutal and merciless in my sentencing. Many who opposed the revolution were executed, as well as many who probably posed no threat at all, but were suspected or even very slightly associated with those who did. We couldn't put up with any competition. In December 1792, I successfully argued for the execution of the king for crimes against France and her people, and continued to encourage the crowd to rise up against the aristocracy. They executed Louis XVI on January 21st, 1793, and his wife, Marie Antoinette, was executed 9 months later. I finally got rid of the monarchy.
Tell us what happened after the death of the king and queen and the end of the monarchy.
On July 27, 1793, I was elected to the Committee of Public Safety, formed to oversee the government with virtual dictatorial control. Having such huge power over life and death, I called for more purges and executions. By the summer of 1794, many in the revolutionary government began to question my motives, as the country was apparently no longer threatened by outside enemies. A coalition of moderates formed to oppose me and my followers.
Many people said that this was the end of Robespierre, the end of you. Do you agree? Tell us about it.
On July 27, 1794, myself and many of my allies were arrested and taken to prison. I was able to escape with the aid of a sympathetic jailer and hid in the city hall in Paris, where I received word that the National Convention had declared me an outlaw. I tried to commit suicide, but succeeded only in wounding my jaw with a bullet. Shortly after, troops from the National Convention stormed the building and seized and arrested me and my followers. The next day, me and 21 of my allies were executed at the guillotine.
Oh dear, so what became of France after this, and where did the power go?
After the coup, the French Revolution became much less radical. The Directory's 4 years in power were filled with financial crisis, discontent, inefficiency, and, above all, political corruption. In 1799, a military coup led by Napoleon Bonaparte overthrew the Directory and established him as first consul, with dictatorial powers. In 1804, Napoleon proclaimed himself Emperor of France. The event marked the end of the French Revolution and the beginning of the Napoleonic era, in which France would come to dominate much of continental Europe.
So it seems that you had a powerful influence on the history of France. How will you be remembered, and what was your legacy, Robespierre?
I'm mainly remembered as the architect of the Reign of Terror, the period of bloodshed and violence that occurred at the start of the French Revolution. I'm remembered for my influence on the Reign of Terror because I strongly supported the government's right to execute those who were opposed to it. Although I was against the death penalty, I believed that the ends justified the means. In other words, setting up a stable France meant executing those who were unbalancing things. Because I had several of the enemies of the revolution executed, this made me highly unpopular and ultimately led to my downfall.
Oh dear. Thank you very much for sharing your life with us, Robespierre. Thank you very much.
It's a pleasure.